question. Related to that, I kind of, or maybe it's a question, about bureaucracy. It seems like one of the kind of things about and in the city and the cities that runs through is that one of the probably most boring things that you very rarely see in imagined cities is that bureaucracy is crucial for keeping things together, and it's a very messy, slightly structured political thing related to poured concrete in one end and to kind of pickpockets in the other end.
I think I love that that observation. I mean, I think bureaucracy is enormously important. I mean, I'm not a Weberian, but I've read enough of Weber for the problem of bureaucracy to loom quite big for me. And I think also it is related to this question of what it is that makes cities both kind of ground level habitable, but also kind of always fantastic, which is this notion that we're sort of getting at of kind of surplus and sort of something that escapes the boundaries of any kind of conscious planning. And the interesting thing about bureaucracy, I think, is that the way it intersects with the city, it does something as dry and drab and iron cage-like as bureaucracy also has a kind of ecstatic surplus which is not in its own control. And the example I always comes to my mind is, one of the most beautiful descriptions, I think, of the fantastic nature of a city and of walking with that kind of dreamlike bewilderment through a city and experiencing it as a fantastic realm comes not from what we would perhaps normally think of as the fantastic elements of the city, which are like the great grandiose cathedrals, the sort of Gaudi and the or the enormous kind of fascist monuments, or some enormous piece of public architecture. There's a description in an Algernon Blackwood short story or novel where he talks about the bewilderment as being like the bewilderment of a man trying to find a post box in a foreign city. And I think it's one of the most fantastic phrases, because it's this absolutely drab, everyday, quotidian thing that if you were being shown around the city by a native, they would never bother to show you the post boxes. They would say, come and see St Paul's Cathedral. And you'd be going, what are those red things? That we can be going, look at the cathedral. And you'd be going, seriously, I need to post this letter. And that's this sort of, and that's, this incredible, the placement of post boxes is sort of extruded by bureaucracy in the most kind of banal way. And yet if you don't understand the workings of a city, and this is how culture shock is magical. This is how, I think, when you go to another city, because we all in this room live in a wired world, I kind of know what the big public buildings look like because I've got access to Flickr, but I have absolutely no idea how the buses work. That's magic right there. And I fear sometimes the depiction, the creation of fantastic cities, whether it's in literature or games or film or anything, sort of prioritizes, if you like, the public works projects over the lost post boxes.
Yeah, I mean, it is that minutia of a city that really creates the soul of a city, and that's really interesting because you're right. A lot of cities, imaginary cities, especially big budget movies, feel unreal because they are sort of. It's all about the public. It's all about the cathedrals. It's not about the mailboxes, and that's what in the cities. That I've worked on, that I've helped create, it's the minutiae we have to concern ourselves with, because when you can explore a city, an imaginary city, you will look for those things. You have to wonder, where do people live, where do they shop, where do they get their milk, where do they post their letters, and that's the soul of a city. Everything else is, that's just the sort of the pretty picture, but the soul of the city exists in the details.
There's something in the kind of one of the themes going through the last 150 years of urban sociology, being kind of studies of invisibility. Kind of invisibility as one of the core elements of what makes up the urban experience, what you actually don't not recognize because you live it. Things like thieves, strangers, familiar strangers, and so on. And then kind of there's quite a lot of interesting things in how these things reach. Like familiar strangers is one of those. Where kind of there are strangers you see so often that they are familiar faces on the buses, your commute and so on. And still, they're not anyone you know. But I think invisibility is one of the other things I wanted to kind of bring up, because I was wondering, would you actually approach that in a game? We actually have to make everything visually. kind of it's not non-representational theory of smells and sounds. It is very much kind of what you see.
Excuse me, just one thing. There's a lot of people standing here. Can we just take a short break so everyone can find a seat inside?